Hi, this is Bryant with Slam, and on this week's Slam Presents, I speak with Wendy Marquis, oil painter who has her studio on Main Street in Belgrade, and who is affectionately known as the Truck Lady. And since you got that designation pretty early on here in Montana, I think that's a great place to start telling your story. So how did you get that nickname, and what does that mean to you to be called the Truck Lady?
Let's see, I was searching one day out in Spring Hill looking for something to paint, and I found this old truck in the weeds, and it struck me because it was part of the landscape. Like, the barn was next to it and the trees were next to it, and I fell in love with it. And I painted it and really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the graphic shapes of the truck, the funky rust of the truck, the romance behind it. And then I couldn't stop painting trucks. And it's funny because a couple times I thought, these aren't gonna sell, I should stop. And then I kept getting these wonderful reactions from viewers about the sentiments and the memories these trucks stirred up in them. And that really motivated me to paint more of them. And I seem to not be able to stop.
So what is the name of this painting?
This one is called A Matter of Perspective.
And that's because you have a truck in two perspectives?
Yes, yes.
So when you look at this truck, how does this truck speak to you enough to inspire you to paint it in two perspectives?
Well, I always look for the right light and which gives me shadows. So early morning light or late afternoon light, that was what was happening here. And he had multiple trucks out in the field. And I loved the deep contrast in this one versus the softness in this one. And I kind of think it sort of symbolizes to me, along with the title of, it depends on what direction you're facing, what your perspective is, especially right now with what's going on in the world. And I do amp up the colors. You know, I make those colors more intense. So yeah, that's kind of what attracted me to that.
And how much of what's happening in the world at a given moment is brought into your work?
I think it's more what's happening in me, and at least until the present time. I'm sensitive based on where I am in my own heart, you know, and I react to what I find that way. So at this time, I was really trying to work on differences in things and in situations and also in value. So there's so much concentration on that. It's in the foreground. There's all this contrast, and this one is softer, and it's kind of like the thoughts in the back of your head. Or yeah, did I answer that question?
So I think, and let me, I guess, rephrase it this way. So what's going on may affect you on how you go about trying to start the art. And so, like, your starting point might be more affected by where you're at than what the finished product is once you start the art.
Yes, yes. I mean, I can drive by a zillion different trucks, and maybe 2% of those get my fire going.
So what is the difference? What is that 2% that sparks you? What do you think comes across that I just have to paint this?
It's color, number one. Like finding an old, completely rusted, monochromatic truck, no, that one's not gonna do anything for me. And then I can imagine all the other colors that I can pull and create in those shadows. So I really like color, and I like shadows. I think that's the big thing. And also in the setting, although a lot of times, like this was just like that. only I ooched this truck a little, like I had to tweak this space in here. Yeah.
And do you think colors is more of an emotional thing, or is it more cerebral?
I think it's emotional, but I think my forever quest to learn to improve my techniques that show the viewer depth and color is cerebral, because I've had to learn that.
Well, so when you found this truck and you know you wanted to paint it, did you really know what the end product would be, or is that something you discovered in the process of painting?
My strongest paintings, I already know what it looks like.
So you really have a finished product in mind. So how much of that do you discover in painting? Or is it pretty much you think you have an image and at the end it really comes out just like what you thought?
No, like the drawing that I do on the canvas and the thinking that I do about the colors that the palette's gonna be, that's done, that's put on the canvas, and then after that, it's evolving.
So
because I'm figuring it out as I go along. You know, and if I'm painting what I thought it was gonna look like and it doesn't look good, then I change it.
How much of the color scheme is reflecting of your mood?
It's the mood at the moment. Like, I just realized that when I see something that I want to paint, this like fire is in me, and it's like it's magic, and then it gets put away until I have time to make that painting, and then when I'm ready to make that painting, I somehow bring back that feeling I had at that time.
So this is not plein air, this is in the studio.
Yeah.
And it's not a photograph, it's just you kind of capture a mental memory of how this is going to be.
No, I take photos for reference, especially because there's an accuracy that has to work for representations of trucks.
But you also have a feeling in that moment that you tap back into, and you have an emotional memory.
Right, yeah, and then there's a point where I don't look at the photo anymore, and then I go from there emotionally, I think.
Great. Is there anything else that you want to talk about this painting?
Well, one thing I want to talk about, I guess, is when I first started painting, I was trying to make everything look exactly like nature. And as I've evolved, I've learned that it's great to put detail where you want the eye to focus. So this is more like the focus. And this is softening out, and I really softened the foreground. And that was a big step for me, because I've always painted every little thing in complete detail. So this was fun, and also just all these other colors that I pulled into the shadows, and those shadows relate to that, and it's in there. So I pull a painting together by putting sprinkles of all the colors that were on the palette throughout the painting, so it makes your eye move around the piece almost subconsciously. You don't even know that's happening.
So as you evolved, you went from something that was more realistic to more of your interpretation. Do you think you're able to be more exposed and leave more of you on the painting?
I don't know. I think it's more of a letting go, of having confidence that the viewer will figure that out, that that's grass. And it's taken me confidence and courage to let go of that pressure that, oh, I have to make every blade of grass look exactly, how it is. And maybe that really wasn't purple in there, but I like it there, it works. Well,
yeah.
My tagline is, I paint rural romance. So I feel like newcomers, well, I feel like everyone but younger generations, not like old people that grew up way before we did, we find a romance to the things that I paint. And so there's a nostalgia that's appealing to a lot of people. Like times gone by that may never, they're not gonna come back. Just like that old truck is not gonna come back. And I kind of want to capture it before it rusts and disappears or the land changes, but bring it into the contemporary art niche, I guess. You know, and the way I frame them is more contemporary style of framing. And so I think I want to appeal to a more contemporary artist that's art collector that's interested in contemporary art. You know, I think I'd frame them way differently. I think I'd paint more people in the trucks, and yeah, I look at it, I don't know, I guess that answers it. I don't know.
Let's talk a little bit more about the rural romance. So it seems to me that you're a storyteller, telling the story of this truck or this object that meant something to someone once upon a time, but now has kind of been left out to pasture.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think this is the objects you like to focus on? What about that story is so appealing to you?
I think the time was a simpler time where there was more romance and people moved more slowly and they appreciated the sunset more, or, you know, like with the barns that I paint, I imagine a whole group of people coming together to build that barn, and that whole like neighborhood familial experience that they did all together, you know, or families stayed together more in the same house or same plot of land when barns were being built and cars were being built like that. And there's stories in all these things that I paint that intrigue me because I don't know the story.
Do you feel responsibility as a painter of capturing that nostalgia? Do you feel responsibility to really bring that story to life of all these people who put all that work to create that barn originally?
I think I'm honoring those people and capturing that in case it goes away. You know, like I want to hold on to it. I think a lot of us want to hold on to that, especially with the way the world is changing and industries change things, and you know, that rural nostalgic time, which some people are still living in.
I read that you want to, when people sit in front of your art, you want to give them a sense of time and place.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, what do you mean by that?
Well, I have this vision that if, let's say you bought one of my paintings.
Okay.
And you're hanging out on your couch, and I want you to just go into that painting, like be in that painting, and be walking around that pasture or smelling that truck, you know, or the grass, and feeling the heat of the sun that is really a Montana feeling, although a lot of my paintings appeal to people from all over.
So you think you're trying to invoke a sense of peace?
Yeah.
You want to sense, or you want to invoke some deep emotions because your work is very emotional.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the landscapes are more peaceful. I think the barns and the trucks have more stories and let people let their imagination flow when they, you know, like get them to wonder.
Wonder what is the story behind this barn? What was so special that now it comes across on the canvas. So, Wendy, what is the name of this painting?
It's called Rural Endurance.
And what was the inspiration? Why did this barn speak to you so much?
I could tell how old it was. Like, it was a weird looking barn. It was all brick, which I softened out. So I knew it had been there a really long time. Also, based on the size of this cottonwood, in Montana, I've noticed where there's big trees around a building, you know that's an older building. Yeah, and it was a different kind of barn too. And I named it Rural Endurance because it has endured. It's old. And the people that built it, they have, like, farmers have to have endurance. They're tough, I think.
Yeah, it's
From
not
what
an
I can
easy
tell.
lifestyle.
No,
You
not at all.
are dedicated.
Yeah.
You are up early, long hours.
Yep, and the horses don't care what time it is. There, this was a painting that I edited. This was all woods back here. So I simplified it. So it
Why
wasn't
did
so
the field
busy.
speak to you more than just you wanted to make it less busy?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you don't do everything that's in the photo.
No, that's you as an artist helping bring your vision to life. You're starting from a place of inspiration, but what makes this you is the edits you decide to modify.
Yeah, and what I want to focus on, like those beautiful doors, and these cool shadows. I love putting light in the windows of barns because it opens it up versus like a black hole.
And do you have a really cool story about this barn, about this painting?
Not so much about this particular painting, but barns in general. Like, my mind, just from reading and education, and knowing what ranchers and farmers do, and they probably don't do this anymore, but back in the day, there was the barn raising. And the whole neighborhood and families came around and put this thing together like it was like a swarm of bees, and they raised the roof and the walls. And then, I just get the chills thinking about that. It's such a beautiful coming together, which doesn't happen so much in our era that we live in. And then there's so many stories of it's pouring rain and somebody runs into the barn for protection, or during the war, people were hidden in barns, or there's little romantic interludes that happen back in the hay in the back of the barn. And livestock is protected in there. It's like a mom with her big arms protecting what's ever in there. Livestock, crops.
When you look at this barn, do you have a story that comes to mind of what happened in that? Or does it constantly change because that barn's been there for a while and it has endured? So do you come up with new stories every time you see it?
Yeah, I do, because that barn wasn't a really big barn. There wasn't a whole working farm all around it. I think it was more a horse barn. Yeah, so I see so many different barns, and just it evokes different stories. But I just think the barn in general as a structure, I just think of it as this big protective, like, anchor for a piece of property and for the people that lived nearby. Even the family, but even others nearby.
That may have taken a whole community to build. It was built with a very utilitarian purpose. That has a story and has really impacted the life of the people who put it up. It's not just a house.
Yeah.
It's something so much more.
And think of when you were a little kid, if you got to go into a barn and how magical it was and how it smelled in there, and yeah.
For me, kind of like a barn story that I thought is super cool is I grew up playing with little barns and stuff. I was always fascinated by it. Maybe that's why years later I moved to Montana. But in September for Slam, we put on the Slam Community Jam at Eagle Mountain. And it was this beautiful September night, and off to the side of me was this horse barn. And it was like something totally out of a dream, where I grew up playing with barns, and now I'm throwing an event in this field next to a barn. And I hadn't really thought of that until you talked about just the impact of a barn. And it's funny, about one of the most memorable moments of my year was based around a barn.
And barn dances. I didn't even think of that one.
Yeah, I haven't been to a barn dance yet. Still looking.
I don't know if I have. Maybe I have back in the day somewhere. Yeah.
So is this painting for sale?
It is for sale.
And they can find out more on your website.
Yes.
Where do you think ideas come from?
The universe.
The universe, and you see that it kind of just flows through you, and then in a moment as you're driving. Let's talk a little bit about your creative process. When you want to find inspiration, you go hunting for stuff out in Montana?
Yep.
And so you're just driving, and then all of a sudden you're kind of like, that's it, that's what I want to paint. And so you just know, it's just the feeling that is invoked in you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I could drive around all day and find nothing. Or I could drive around all day and find one thing out of 100 pictures I might take. But it was worth the whole day. Or it might happen it just happens spontaneously when I'm not intentionally looking for things. And a lot of times people send me images that they think I would love, but it's not the same as me being there.
No, you feel something, and
Yeah.
as we talked about with your truck painting, was the idea that once you're ready to paint, you have to re-invoke that emotion that you felt, that spark of inspiration. So have you always been very in touch with your emotions?
Yes, I think so.
And do you think that's why you always wanted to be an artist?
Yeah. I think in 7th grade, I remember this art class, and I knew I was an artist. This one particular class. I just knew it. And I was getting encouragement from this really cool art teacher. And also, I mean, my mom owned a gallery. So I walked by every day in my house, walking up this red carpeted stairs, all this art from really well-known masters, so it was in my blood. And then my mom owned the gallery. She didn't work as an artist, though she did do some really cool murals in our house. And then my sister became a jewelry designer. So there was a lot of that already there, although I could have become, an engineer. But that was where I felt comfortable.
And then when you got to open up your own gallery, how much did you get to talk to your mother and learn from her experience as somebody who ran a gallery?
I never could, because she passed away 20 years ago.
No, I'm sorry to hear that.
That's all right. I wish I could have. She would have been proud.
Do you think then that her spirit helped flow through you and gave you some creative advice or just a creative feeling when you set about to create your studio? Do you think there was inspiration from your childhood that reflects
Oh yeah.
that?
I mean, there's a picture of her over there, and she smiles at me every day.
And then talk a little bit about owning a gallery and what that means and having the space to be able to come in and create.
Oh, it's a dream come true for me. I've had my studio in an old warehouse with no hot water and my garage, and this space is like what I dreamed of it being. I worked in a graphic design studio in the south end of Boston right out of college, and it was the old brick walls and everything. And I think I fell in love with that space at that time. I worked as a faux finisher and a muralist and a furniture painter for 15 years in New Hampshire. So then I worked as a graphic designer before that. So I never let myself be a painter, like a canvas painter like I am now, because I didn't think it was practical. So I was on a ladder 6 days a week, working in people's homes, working in hotels, doing what the client wanted me to paint. So it wasn't as much an expression of my own desire of what I wanted to paint. So when I came out here, I didn't have any work, and I could kind of start exploring what I wanted to do. And in my dream, I would have a really great space to work in with real beautiful light, which I've never had. And light for an artist is really important. And I'm sad when I don't have enough light, you know? So, and then I have a chance to display my work, which I feel like gives it even more validity. And I can represent myself, although I have it at other places that sell it as well.
So do you feel most creative in this space?
Oh yeah, yeah. This is like, every day I walk in here, and first of all, I love the smell, and then I don't know, it just has this energy, and I just feel so blessed that I'm still in here, but it's taken nonstop work to stay in here.
I think there's a really good lesson there about finding the space that really speaks to you. And I teach dance, and I tell people, even within the same dance floor, just walk around until you find the right space. Some people get constricted or they don't find themselves creative, but I think part of it is you just haven't put yourself in the right place to really be successful or really be creative.
Oh yeah, like I remember looking at houses and looking at rentals, and I get a physical feeling. Like if it's not right, it's like something's crawling up my back.
It taps into that emotion.
Yeah, yeah.
Taps into that intuition that has allowed you to paint.
Or what direction your easel is at, and I would never have it my back to the door. Yeah, and I mean, and also the history of this 108-year-old building is so in sync with the history of what I like to paint.
It just aligned.
Yeah.
So what's really a lesson there that you could tell artists who are currently looking for their own space?
Find a space that you feel at home in, and physically comfortable, and emotionally comfortable, and that you can afford. Or take a big leap of faith like I did.
Yeah, and push yourself, but it's like you're going to be exposing yourself so much and giving so much yourself to the canvas that you really need to be safe on all those fronts. And even taking that big leap where you push yourself maybe outside your financial comfort zone was a motivating factor that helped you rise up.
Oh, for sure. Like, I don't have the luxury of saying, I don't feel like going to work today. Like, I have to be here. But I'm disciplined naturally, but that also gets me out of bed because there's rent to pay.
Sometimes it's helpful to have a little extra motivation.
Yeah.
So besides painting, you also teach. What is one way that teaching others to paint has helped you as an artist yourself?
Well, I never had the confidence to think that I knew what I was doing enough to help other people learn to do what I do. And I also was extremely scared to get up in front of anyone. Like, if I even raised my hand in a meeting, I was sick to my stomach and my heart was racing and all that stuff. So I learned that I could break it down and simplify it enough for people that didn't think they could do it. Like, you probably can relate to this. People that think they have no talent. You know, if you break it down into small enough steps, and also don't let them feel anxious. Like, I want to be really open to them and not let them be afraid to ask me anything. And then, like, the reward that I've gotten back, this energy that reflects back to me that I had no idea would even happen. I just wanted to help these people. And then that, like, fires me up, and it was kind of like a reset, so that when I get back to painting my own work, I'm really refreshed and excited.
Yeah, for every energy you give out, you get it back and you receive. And it's like the old saying too, the best way to learn something is to teach.
This is true, yeah. And I also had to, because I'm not teaching like professional art classes, I was teaching those low-key wine and sip and paint classes. Those are simple pieces. And I had to learn to back off and not give too much information, or they would leave.
Well, it's also interesting you said in the beginning you're afraid to even raise your hand. So I have to also imagine you facing that fear of being in front of the crowd and talking and stepping outside your comfort zone is probably giving you some creative freedom as an artist too, right? Because you're able to expose yourself so openly and push yourself in one way that it probably opened up some freedom inside you to be a little bit more open on the canvas.
Yeah, yeah, and the pieces that I teach, which you can see over there, they're totally different style. They're quick and loose, all sorts of different give me some freedom to play, but I have to be conscious. I can't make it too hard. Yeah, and so then I've kind of loosened up so that I can be back on what I'm concentrating on as a professional who's trying to sell work. It's more serious. So it makes me a little less serious, actually.
Well, that's good. It's like less pressure. You don't have to be always perfect. You just have to be in excellence.
Yeah, and also as an introvert, to interact with people and make relationships is another learning experience.
So it didn't necessarily help you in terms of being an artist, but it helped you round out as an artist in the professional tools, because even just interacting with somebody on a low-key basis might make it easier for you to interact with someone who you're selling a painting to.
Yeah, and that's a whole art in itself.
Yeah, it's kind of rounding out as a professional.
And as just a human. You know, just being my little introverted self in here painting all day and having to break out and change gears is hard.
Well,
but it's good.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of changing gears and doing something that's hard, this year has really been a tough year for obvious reasons. So what's one piece of advice you could give to artists who are struggling to be creative or who are struggling to refine their creative flow since it's been so disruptive?
Take all those emotions that you have right now and put it into your work. You know, like, emotion is powerful in art and it shows in your work. One thing that I have followed is being, it sounds cliched, but being authentic about what I want to paint. And it shows. People, and there's been times where I'm like, I shouldn't paint this, it might not sell, like I should be painting dogs or horses. But that's not what I want to paint, and that's not what speaks to me. And when people now see my work, they're like, that's Wendy's work. Because there's some magic that's in your heart and soul that appears. I don't know how it happens, but let that come out in you and it will show.
You know the story you want to tell and be genuine.
Right, and I mean, art that's not genuine, art, I don't think it's as strong.
I totally agree about tapping into your emotions, and there's real power and sadness and anger and some of the stuff that we may not want to express, but like you can't trap it, you need to let it out. And you as an artist who taps into their emotions to help rediscover or think about the inspiration, when you look back at your paintings, can you tell how you feel? Do you notice like you may have been sadder when you painted this, or you may have been a little bit more upset, or you might have been a little more joyful? When you look back at your paintings, you see a record of your emotions.
It's like you smell a smell or you hear a song and you're totally back in that emotional time. And it's funny because I was going through a really hard time, probably hardest time ever, that one of my family members was really ill. Those two paintings I painted during that time were two of the best paintings I think I've ever painted. That's crazy.
Yeah, don't avoid your feelings, tap into it. It probably helped you process too.
Yeah, and also when you're painting, you probably know this when you're dancing. You're there. It sounds trite, but you're in the moment and everything else goes away. That's why it's so much fun. You know, because you're just being instinctive. I mean, you're figuring colors out and so on, but it's so freeing. I am the happiest and I sleep the best when I'm happy with a painting that I just left in my studio and came home.
Yeah, there's something special about being a creative in an authentic way.
It's a release too. And that's got, I don't know, there's just some magic that happens. Like I look around this room and how do all these pieces, there's a connection of my spirit, and that is magic to me.
Do you have one painting looking back that is your favorite, or are you one of those artists who doesn't have a favorite?
Well, I think I have favorites, and those pieces have been the hardest ones for me to sell. It's like they're my child that I'm letting out of the nest.
Yeah, a piece of you.
Yeah, but you have to if you're selling.
Have you ever had a piece that you just couldn't sell?
I don't have that luxury. I've been thinking about it with that painting actually. But the cool thing about making reproductions, I have a friend who's a professional photographer. So she comes in here and she shoots my paintings. And so I always have that image still. And I can make reproductions out of it.
Do you get that same emotional feel looking at the photograph as the picture, or it's one removed, so it's
You
not
mean
gonna be
her
the same?
photograph of the original painting? No, but it's comforting because I can still enjoy it.
Yeah, you still have a connection.
Yeah, like that piece over there, the bottom left metal print with the GMC going off into the road.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is summer joy here to me. That warmth of the sun and those big puffy clouds and the road. I really like to paint roads because that invokes emotion in, like, where's that road going? Where am I gonna go?
A real sense of adventure.
Yeah, for sure.
So if people wanted to buy your art, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you or to learn more about you?
They could go to my website. That would probably be the first, Wendy Marquis Art. And my contact info is on there, my email, my telephone, Facebook, Instagram.
And do you have any events that your art will be at that you want to promote?
Right now, my work is at Map Brewing, and it will be there till the end of November. And I always have it at Dawn Josephine Collective, which is right on Main Street in Bozeman. And here. So I don't really have any other events going on because of COVID. I do have Artist Sunday, which is coming up, which is a really cool national, or maybe it's international event, where instead of like Black Friday or Small Business Saturday, all these artists are joining, and it's a day to shop for art. So I am gonna have that, and there'll be some kind of special going on then.
And that'll be right here in the studio?
Yeah, and online. Yeah, the whole in-studio shopping, I haven't quite figured that out yet.
We're all learning.
Yeah.
So any last lessons or any last inspiration that you want to talk about before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I feel grateful that I get to live my dream. That sounds corny too.
No.
I encourage people to do that. Like, doing what you love is huge, and that's success. It's not all financial. I feel like, what is success? But this is what I've always wanted to be doing, and I think people should follow that if they can.
You're always going to fail if you don't try.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started renting this place, every morning I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. But get out of your comfort zone.
You gave yourself the container to grow. And you're
Yeah.
not going to grow if you're in a small pond, so you gave yourself a big pond that
Yeah,
you were able to grow into.
which I'm trying to do again with some other goals I have for next year. Get out of my box again. Got a little too comfortable in here, I think.
Well, we're very excited to see what those new goals will be. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, and please check out Wendy when you have a chance. Until next time, bye.
Thank you.